So I have made a influence on the podcasting world beyond simply our own.
Oh.
So if you guys recall the Duck Detective article I shared to the group chat, where a duck finds a woman's body, I shared that to the Crunch Discord, and to my wonder and amazement, instead of Pittsburgh news this week, they read that article on the podcast. I was driving home from work. I was like, no way. No way. Well, because like when I read it, like I was like, oh, this is totally going to be something that would be like right up their alley. So I just threw it out there. I was like, okay, I know this isn't Pittsburgh news, but the duck is a detective. And then Patrick Nevy literally reads out, but the duck is a detective. I was like, so that was fun.
Did you post that in the Bits and Memes channel?
I did. Yeah, that's where I put it. Okay. Yeah, it's been buried now. There's been a bunch of stuff posted since then, but I guess commercial for the Crunch Discord. If you like the Crunch, well, first of all, listen to the Crunch. Second of all, join their Discord. It's pretty fun.
And tell them we sent you because
and they'll be like, who?
Who now?
The what?
Who are those people?
Did Whatness come?
You know, who knows? This might be our
big break.
Big break.
Although they didn't mention me my name, but I don't really care because it shows up in the chat. So
sure,
it was fun. A little surprise driving home from work. I was like, oh, no way.
Speaking of Crunch, it's dead week for me.
How goes that?
It goes, and it do go.
This too shall pass, and hopefully so will you.
They don't stop coming, and they don't stop coming.
In what sense of the word? Because either one seems favorable at this point.
Good point.
But no, it's it be like that. I'll be all. If all things go well in a couple of weeks, I'll be all graduated and all engineered up.
If you guys hear anything, it's you in the background, and you know who you are.
Shut up.
The two listeners listening to this, them being in the background in the future. Some of them, the two, playing. What are they playing back there?
They're just watching something. I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I just seen people talking.
We have guests in the home tonight. Rather spontaneous, but
scheduling has been weird. So.
It has.
I always find the spontaneous hangouts more fun than the non-spontaneous hangouts.
Typically, yeah, that's how it
we were
goes.
Just like, well, I hope you guys don't mind us just disappearing for about an hour to record the podcast, because that's what we're going to do.
So we like listening to your podcast. Go for it.
Yeah.
Riley is recovering more or less from some sort of illness.
On the upswing from an illness.
What was the thing you were at just before this?
I was at Dio Night, which I always have on Mondays, on which we are recording, which is an unusual day for us to record. But,
because end of year seminary stuff happened on Wednesday, and I had work on Saturday, and we forgot on Sunday, and Riley was sick, so we're just like, well, let's push it back a little bit. So,
well, we didn't forget on Sunday. It was just Riley was sick.
Yes.
I forgot. And then Riley was sick, so it made up for it.
And then I had to finish a thing for my SPS application, so I wouldn't have been able to anyway. And then I remembered that I had the copy on a flash drive. That's where it was.
Oh, dang. Well, at least you have it.
But we're here now.
Happy ending to that story, I guess.
All's well that ends well.
I suppose we could have just not said anything, and they would have been none the wiser because we're still releasing it on time.
I mean, yeah, but we get meta here.
That's
talk
true.
About just the
not
stuff.
TM, not meta TM, but just meta.
We are not doing any metaverse endeavors up in this place.
I don't check the Facebook, and it auto posts every time we upload a podcast because you can do that with Facebook, which is just the descriptions of the podcast as I write them.
Tell you what, my first Facebook post in 4 years, I plan on doing it in 2 weeks.
I graduated college. Hello, everyone.
Hello, life update. I have
the last one being you.
I moved to Fargo.
Yeah.
My last one was, hey, I moved
graduated
to Fargo.
Home.
And the one before that was, hey, I have Facebook now.
I finished high school.
No. It was just I have Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
This will be my third ever proper post on Facebook.
Congratulations.
No, it is nothing to be congratulated for. It sucks. No.
Do you feel like you've missed out?
No.
Then what's the harm?
Exactly.
Heck, I haven't posted anything on Facebook, and I only post on Twitter, which is effectively like locking myself in a closet and talking to myself because
I don't do enough of that as it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, he locks me in the closet too to talk.
Gosh, speaking of closet, we're going to be having more roommates moving in soonish.
Oh.
Yeah.
So a Newman friend / recent convert to the faith is moving in like next week or the week after. And then Aaron's going to be back in the basement at some point this summer.
Oh, my hovel will disappear.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
We'll make something work, though.
You
Brian
can always
and I
throw a sleeping bag on the floor in your room.
Yeah, there's plenty of room. Or I could borrow one of my parents' nice cots. Like they're like padded and everything, and they have like they're pretty comfy to sleep in actually. But I can maybe borrow one of those for a weekend when you come up or something. They're pretty nice. Indiana Jones and his sidekick are observing.
Yes.
We should really do a video podcast one of these days. But I have to do the work to set it up. That's the problem.
Yeah, that would be the big kicker. First off, we'd have to look decent.
I'd have to clean my room.
Well, not necessarily. Because you're going to be moving out of that place in a little while anyway. I suppose whatever room you have.
Whatever room I happen to be in will have to be clean.
Yeah, I suppose that still follows.
But then, I mean, they just have to hear us, and it's bad enough to have to hear us.
Yeah.
And if you have to deal with all this, audibly motions to all of this.
I think even if we do eventually add video, we're still going to make the audibly jokes because there's still going to be people who listen
who are listening to the audio version.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Even so. Like, I don't feel too bad because, like, even clerically speaking, they did an audio podcast a few times, but they haven't uploaded one in, like, months. So
nobody goes to podcasts to watch people.
Yeah, precisely.
Because if you're watching it, all you're watching is two people at a table talking into microphones.
Mm-hmm.
Or the static image they put up because it's the YouTube upload.
There's more than one. Like, podcasting is not a monolithic business.
No.
So, like, there's some people who go for those video podcasts, like the Joe Rogan types and the different people who follow along on that formula, like your Matt Frads and your Catholic talk shows and Catholic gentleman shows, because, you know, we need that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But then there's, like, this whole other group of podcasts who are, like, in the audio-only world, because we're OG.
Yep. I would only add video to help expand our audience. Like as another platform, like probably do like a modicum of effort to make it look decent. Like honestly, like audibly looking at us right now, this isn't too bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we wanted to do the streamer thing, we could turn on the LEDs in the living room behind us.
RGB.
I
could like
or pretty yet,
have my favorite Supreme Court justice.
Have my
you got yours
here,
too. Yeah.
And then just like have it doing a strobe thing while I'm in here.
Because just then audibly read it was like the Batman trailer. Did you see the one where they put Adam West in the Batman trailer? Did you guys see that one? It was pretty good. It was like the Corridor Digital guys. They did a cut of the Batman trailer, but they put the 1960s Adam West Batman in, instead of Robert Pattinson. It actually kind of slaps.
That's funny. Riley is audibly banging his head while he changes
color
his
shifts.
Lights. Like
he did the audibly. LED equivalent of the color shifting effect from Windows Movie Maker, except for much faster.
Movie Maker, man,
takes me back. Gotta love you that default text blue screen title.
The smooth fade.
Smooth.
Wow.
Fade. Look at all these visual effects you can audibly see.
Practical visual effects too.
Yeah.
We like practical effects.
Oh, here's the real one.
Oh, there it is. Now you look like a John Wick action scene.
This is the nightclub fight in John Wick, minus the guns or the fight. Or the John Wick. But it's got flashing lights.
For
so
all
it's
you
basically
know.
the same thing.
I mean, he could have Keanu Reeves back there, and people could audibly see that.
See,
There could be a bunch of people dying in my room back here. Who knows?
Who knows? Audibly, not so audibly, because then we'd know.
Because you can't hear it.
You put a silencer on because that exists in real life.
See, if they were ever to make a Castlevania or like some sort of vampire hunting movie, it should be like a John Wick style thing where just using various like vampire hunting kits from the 1600s or whatever, where it's like a priest going through and reckoning.
See, they may have tried that with like the Van Helsing movie or something.
Or Velocipaster, apparently.
Oh, really?
There's like this cheap like C movie.
Oh dear.
It's called
I don't even know that
Velocipaster.
it gets a C movie. Like,
It's pretty like...
this might be a D movie.
Yeah. It's down there. I haven't bothered to watch it, but every time I come across it, when the occasions I remember I have Amazon Prime Video, I'm just like, one of these days I'll watch it.
It's on
But that
Tubi.
is not this day. Because it's weird.
They put anything on Amazon Prime just because they want to be able to compete with Netflix and such, but they cannot because they're Amazon Prime.
Speaking of Netflix, they did the crackdown on the password sharing now, so we are Netflixless. But there wasn't really much left on Netflix I wanted to watch, although I guess we could have watched Arcane. We probably should have done that.
Arcane is well worth it.
Lol.
From what I've seen of the animation, it looks pretty top notch. So
Jinx was one of the only characters that made sense to me in the very, very, very brief time I played League in like 2014.
So they're characters from the game.
Yeah,
then?
just shoot guys. I mean, pretty straightforward.
So they're characters from the game, not just set in the universe. Like,
well,
their stories are greatly elaborated from what you get in game.
sure,
you don't get anything in game, not even a description.
You don't get nothing.
Okay.
You get very, very limited
like a couple
spatterings of maybe a callous mention of where I'm from or what I care about, or like, just mild personality quips. But to get anything of substance, you have to go to like the stories and the other content that Riot has put out. Yeah.
Basically, the show apparently just elaborates on the backstories of the characters.
It creates whole new backstories for the characters that's totally non-canonical, but
probably
makes for a cool story.
But is still a really cool story. And like, it sort of follows their character trajectories and personalities, but much of the material is original.
Okay.
The setting is not, but like the actual character arcs are.
Speaking of spatterings of callous
Speaking
mentions,
of
we're the
Netflix.
Palladian Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
What are we doing?
We're doing
tonight?
a super serial on the Queen's Gambit.
Ah.
One day, 3 lads from North Dakota were bitten by a radioactive television, and with their powers combined, they are super serial!
I have not seen the chess show yet.
The chess show.
Anna Taylor-Joy, she be doing the chess thing in the 1960s.
She is doing the chess, among other things.
This is not about the X-Men 90s character who infuses cards with kinetic energy and explodes them.
No.
That is a different Gambit.
This is a chess gambit.
This is the Queen's Gambit. So,
Childish Queen's Gambit. Gambino. So, tell
Queen's Gambino.
The Queenish Gambino?
So tell us about the Queen's Gambit TV show.
So the Queen's Gambit is, I think, 2020 Netflix original, somewhere around that time.
I seem to remember it being during the
vaguely pandemic tide.
Right.
And it's actually based on a novel by the same name.
Oh, okay.
So it's quite faithful to the source material, pretty much follows it exactly, so
nice.
that is good. So basically, we start out with 8-year-old Beth Harmon, who is our main character, and she is an orphan. Her mother died in a car crash. That's all we know for now. And she lives at the Methuen Orphanage in somewhere Kentucky, which, incidentally, the nearest big town to this is Lexington, which is not far from where I am.
Nice.
So and I know several people from Lexington. Their diocese sends here. So that's a neat little regional connection. But so it's your typical orphanage, Christian, vaguely. They want to play it off as Catholic, but they act very Protestant, so I don't really know what they're going for with it.
Because screenwriters
Clearly,
don't know what Catholicism is.
They have an actually very nice rendition of the Ave Maria Stella at the end. It's the rhythm is wrong, but like musically it's okay. But anyway, it's this vague Christian orphanage, and of course it's unnecessarily strict and prim and proper, but of course no one actually lives that way outside of the times when they're supervised.
Sounds like a classic depiction of religiousness in 1960s on...
Yeah, it's like the joke I've made is that the most unrealistic thing about this show is the fact that chant was being done in the 60s.
Yeah.
But I digress. So Beth is they give the girls, it's an all-girls orphanage, they give the girls these like tranquilizer pills to keep them docile and, so they don't cause trouble.
Yikes.
And a lot of the kids develop a
unhealthy relationship with it?
An unhealthy relationship with them, a dependence, if you will.
Uh-huh.
And Beth is among those. So she's just kind of existing there and makes friends with a girl named Jolene, who's a black girl who kind of does things her own way and is a bit of a rebel, and so she kind of learns from her a bit. But Beth goes down to the basement to clean some erasers, and there she sees Mr. Scheibel, the janitor, playing chess by himself in his little janitorial operation. She's like, "What's that?" He's like, "This is chess." She's like, "How do you play?" Well, this is after a number of times of her coming down there to observe.
And she finally works up the gumption to
approach him. Yes. And so she's like, "I already know what all the pieces do. That one does that. That one does that." He's like, "Okay, sit down. I'll play you." So they do, and he plays the Scholar's Mate, which is like the typical 4-move checkmate that a beginner wouldn't know how to deal with. Mm-hmm. He's like, "I win. Go wait." And so, but she's persistent and
how'd you
continues.
do that?
I want to learn how to do that. And turns out that she's a bit of a chess prodigy as she continues to play and learn some tactics and principles and such.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually eclipses Mr. Scheibel's skill, by the age of 9 or so. And so she gets permission to go to the local high school and play there, and does a simultaneous with the whole team and beats them all. Where you play a game against everyone at the same time on a separate board.
Mm-hmm.
So she beats 15 high school players simultaneously.
So she's quite good.
She's pretty good. Pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And so she quickly moves her way through the she gains some notoriety and eventually gets adopted by the Wheatleys when she's 13.
Hello, this is the part where I kill you.
I'm reading Machiavelli because I'm quite smart. Yeah.
And I need to get some more water, so vibe while I do that. Or cut this part out, whatever you feel like.
Vibing. Well,
vibing's funnier.
What do we want to vibe about?
Stovetop stuffing mix, savory
there's
herbs.
Stuffing mix on my desk for some reason. I watched it
What
happen
you
too.
need is 1.5 cups of hot water,
You
one
won't say the
package
brand.
or 6 ounces of stovetop savory herb stuffing mix,
A little guessing
40
game for
fresh
the folks at home.
mushrooms,
You can go
2
ahead and guess what
tablespoons of butter,
this
2
product is,
cloves,
who
garlic,
the company is that
minced,
makes it.
1 package, 10
Just
ounce
by reading off
frozen
the
chopped
ingredients.
spinach, thawed, well drained, 1 cupped Kraft
win, you
shredded,
get exactly
low
one
moisture, part
crispy,
skim mozzarella
brand new
cheese, 1 cup Kraft grated Parmesan
box top
cheese.
for education.
Make
because
it. Heat oven to
slice that
400
cardboard,
degrees
support the
Fahrenheit.
kids. The
Add
kids
hot water to stuffing
Could you
mix
spare
in
one-
large bowl. Stir
box
just
top
until
for a
moistened.
poor child
Set aside.
in need of
Remove
education.
stems from mushrooms. Chop
Just
stems.
one little
Melt butter in
half-inch
skillet
cube
on medium
of cardboard.
heat. Add
It's enough to
chopped
save one
stems
whole
and
child.
garlic cooked for 5 minutes.
All right,
Hi,
Riley's,
Riley's audibly back.
Riley's back.
I see we're reading a
mushroom.
stovetop box for content.
And explaining the wonders of box top for education.
Box tops for education. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Anyway, Beth gets adopted, and she
Speaking
goes.
of box tops.
They make
She
that the cold
goes to
open.
Lexington with her perfect new family in their nice, immaculate suburban neighborhood in their perfectly kept home. And of course, this is all a sham because no one's life is this perfect.
Naturally.
If they're doing that, they're hiding some problems.
Mm.
So, what problems are they hiding, and how soon does she discover?
Well, she discovers them very quickly.
Yeah.
And she's like, the father is frequently away on business trips,
Quote unquote.
Business.
quote unquote business trips, and
I mean, it's the 60s. We can connect the dots at this point.
you can, yep, definitely. And Mrs. Wheatley is sort of the housewife that gets left alone all the time, and so she wanted to have, someone to look after to spend her time. Because she was lonely. And so she gets Beth to kind of fill that role. And at first, she's very kind of aloof and sends her to do errands and chores all the time, but they start to grow closer over time. And Mr. Wheatley eventually pulls the trigger on absconding and moves to Denver and leaves them totally alone.
Mm-hmm. He went to go buy milk?
He went to buy milk and cigarettes.
Like,
Dad?
Dad? And so, Mrs. Wheatley and Beth are, left out to dry and don't have any way of supporting themselves, except that Beth is a very good chess player.
mm-hmm.
Sounds
And,
like a competition with some prize money is in order.
Yes, it certainly does. So she goes and plays in the Kentucky State Championship for the, I think, high school division. Maybe it's the, just the overall state championship regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's supposed to be high school. And she goes there. And, as a side note, Mrs. Wheatley happens to have the same tranquilizer pills in her prescription that Beth had at the orphanage.
Uh-huh.
It's the same medicine.
So she has access to those.
She has access to those, which let her see chessboards on the ceiling and play out moves in her in her head without actually having to move pieces on the board and such. And so she plays in the tournament and is like, an unrated player, so everyone writes her off, and she doesn't know how to play because she's never done a tournament before.
Naturally.
Is it like timed chess or what is it?
Oh yeah, I mean, tournament play is going to be timed.
You got those
So
cool
she doesn't
clocks where
she
you, like,
doesn't
flip
have
them
her
back
own
and forth.
clock, and she doesn't know the move rules. Like 120 over 40, she's like, what does that mean? And so she works her way through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And beats and wins the whole tournament, beating Harry Beltic, who's the reigning state champion. State champion. And he's a very highly rated player. And so she continues to work her way through tournaments and and cough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recovering from illness and whatnot.
Yes, and talking on top of it exacerbates the problem. So, Mrs. Wheatley and Beth bounce around a bunch of different tournaments, and she kind of becomes Beth's agent, who schedules and organizes everything.
So at this point, she's almost a professional chess player.
She's pretty, by the strict definition of the word, she is a professional chess player.
There we go.
Mm-hmm.
Gaining clout as she goes from match to match, I imagine.
Mm-hmm. She plays in the U.S. Open at 16.
Ooh.
And is pretty successful at the tournament. She runs into one Benny Watts, who's kind of like one of the best players in America at the moment. Of course, the Americans can't hold a candle to the Soviets.
Naturally, it's the 60s after all.
Mm.
It is the 60s, and the Soviets they play together.
See,
Our game.
They play as a unit rather than individuals like Americans and other Westerners do.
So collectively, yeah, it can be challenging to beat a group of people at chess, but our heroine
Tranquilizers.
knows a thing or two about...
Our heroine has drugs.
Yeah. You cannot
We have
be
an
a
army.
heroin monkey.
We have drugs.
But she knows a thing or two about beating a group of people.
Is that so?
Well, because she played against all those people at the high school.
Well, she played a simultaneous. She didn't.
Oh, not one game. Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yes. But the Russians, they practice together, they strategize together, they help each other
Mm-hmm.
because they have a communal sensibility. So, she plays Benny Watts in the final and gets trounced by him because he's good and she's only 16.
Mm-hmm.
She's like, wow, I thought I was the bestest.
Turns
I'm
out I
clearly
have a
not
character
the
arc
best.
to go through.
No, I'm
Run
gonna...
into adversity? What? In the second act?
No, I'm gonna do drugs.
Oh.
So
Because-
she, being the 60s, there's a lot of experimenting going on.
Naturally. That was
Leave
a
it at that.
60s thing to do.
And with all of the different things that the 60s are known for
All
experimenting
stuffs.
with.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's going on.
So she's just signed up for a bunch of studies or is just seeking them out otherwise?
She's sort of venturing after opportunities on her own.
Uh-huh.
Like, she wants to learn Russian so that she can compete with... She can learn
Russians.
from the Soviets and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Which is probably a bit difficult given the
And so she's
climate.
taking night classes at the local college while she's still in high school and goes to college parties and and her mom tells her to be careful what to smoke.
Is she?
Fairly, but no.
Okay.
narrator. She wasn't.
So yeah, she experiments with different things and sort of typical teenage trying to figure life, self-discovery arc
making
thing.
mistakes along the way, that type of deal.
And so next is a tournament in Mexico City, in which Beth is going to be playing against international competition for the first time. So the notorious Vasily Borgov is going to be there, who is the current world champion.
And
So-
also Russian, judging by the name.
and also Russian, of course. And Beth is excited to find some stiffer competition than she's used to in the States, so she welcomes the opportunity. Has some interesting games against another child prodigy, whom she manages to defeat.
Mm-hmm.
Thereby signaling that she's the best and not washed up.
Naturally.
Coming out of her...
So she works her way all the way up to Borgov, and Borgov just immaculately, flawlessly defeats her. Because he's Borgov, and we can't have our main character triumphing in the second act.
No,
Yep.
no. She isn't that perfect. She's actually a well-written character.
Because the movie has to have, or the show has to happen.
We got like half the show to go. So, Beth is frustrated because she feels she could have played better and all that jazz. And
Actually.
her mother sort of collapses and dies on the trip. And turns out she was hiding some health problems and didn't really get the appropriate treatment for them, so she kind of ran herself into the ground. And was also abandoned by her former Mexican friend. You know, the 60s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mirroring her abandonment by her husband.
Because 60s.
In her... Because the 60s.
Is that the title of the
That's the
episode?
new bit. Because the 60s.
Because the 60s. The 60s are a source of a lot of the problems in this narrative.
Mm-hmm.
So Beth buys a bunch of tranquilizers because they help her play chess, and she doesn't need the prescription in Mexico and can get it for cheaper in Mexico. So, you know, why not? Why not? It's the 60s. You can fly with that stuff.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 60s, man.
Yep.
60s, man.
And so Mr. Wheatley, she contacts him and says, hey, your wife died. You should probably do something about that.
And he's like, oh no.
He's
Anyway.
like, all right, you can have the house. I don't care. Bury her at this place. Yada, yada.
I'm not coming back with milk.
Very cold and unfeeling about his wife dying.
Uh-huh. So she goes back to her house in Lexington and is all sad. And Harry Beltic contacts her.
This
He's
is the
like,
guy.
yo.
Okay.
Yes, this is the guy she beat in the state championship a couple years back. And then he's like, you need someone to train with. I'll be in town over the summer taking some classes. We should play. She's like, I'm better than you and you know it. He's like, you're right, but you also have holes in your play that I can help you. Because Beth is a very impulsive and natural and aggressive player. She's not so much a theoretical player who plays by the book. She's innovative and does things her own way, which creates weaknesses. And Harry is like, I play more by the book.
Because I suppose you can be drawn into traps if you operate on impulse, etc.
Yeah. There's certain setups that make you think, oh, I've got this. But then you don't see the other thing that you don't see the trap created. So they work out and that play, and she generally improves, and the 60s happen, you know.
As they do.
Kids.
As they do.
As they do.
Harry is eventually like, I don't have the obsession to be the best at this that you do. I've taught you everything that I can. I'm supposed to be studying engineering. Have fun. And he goes off. So she goes to the U.S. Open and has to face Benny Watts again, and this time thoroughly trounces him.
Uh-huh.
And then Benny's like, you're pretty good. You should come hang out with me in New York so that you can get ready for Paris and Moscow, which are like the next big upcoming tournaments.
New York.
Moving to New York 'cause I've got problems with my sleep.
That's why I take tranquilizers.
There you go.
Actually, not why she does. So.
That's not why she takes them.
No, she takes them for alternate reasons.
Because chess.
Because 60s.
Chess. Because 60s.
That's
so
the
what
episode
60s
title.
what kind of 60s do they get up to in New York?
Oh, you know.
The New York 60s?
The New York kind of 60s.
Got it.
They get up to the 60s in New York. They also do chess, but, you know.
Let's play chess. Since you are I'm your host and you're my guest, what would you like to do? Play chess? Let's play chess.
And so Beth gets a lot better in this training montage and starts doing puzzles because one of Benny's friends from London comes over and puts up the problems. Audibly pointing at the characters in the background.
Mm-hmm. Cross your head. Anyway, audibly.
They're distracting me. So where were we? New York, yes.
New York.
And so then Beth goes to Paris, and she's like, I'm playing the best chess in my life. This will be a cakewalk. I'll be able to beat Borgov. And then she's like, Paris, where I can 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally.
So she goes on has
No,
a
she
wild
can
night of
lay
partying.
60s.
Late
60s.
60s. Has a wild night of partying and wakes up too late and has to compose herself in a hurry to go play. Borgov, who is one of her first significant opponents in the tournament.
Because in Russia, he's more prepared because the 60s you.
That's right. And so she once again is soundly defeated by Borgov. And she takes it really hard and, like, goes on a downward spiral. Downward spiral.
This time in the 60s.
Not this time. It was always in the 60s.
It always has been.
The real friends were the 60s we made along the way.
So after losing to the final boss of chess,
She's
and
lost
her
to the final boss twice now.
Yeah.
So she's gotten frustrated and wants to give up.
Because it's the
And
third
then-
act.
Because it's the third act now. And Jolene shows up because they've heard that Schneibel has died. Their old friend, the janitor, who is like the only nice person.
Yeah. At the
And so they drive back out to Methuen and attend the funeral of Mr. Scheibel. And Beth goes back into the orphanage that she never wanted to go back into. And Ave Maristella is sung by the Children's. In the 60s, which it would not have been.
Yep.
The Christian Crusade, who have been funding Beth's trips overseas to beat the communists for Jesus,
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
ask her to make a... Those, the only thing worse than a Catholic is a communist, as you well know.
mm-hmm.
And so they ask her to make a public statement decrying communism. She's like, nope. They're like, okay, we're pulling your funding. She's like, okay. And so she's like totally given up on everything and doesn't have enough money to pay on the house. And Mr. Wheatley says, I want it back because I'm running low on money and I own this house. I'm going to sell it. It's like, no, you're not. You told me I could have it. She's like, not in writing. Ha 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 ha.
Yoink. This is mine.
Yoink. And she's like, I'll buy it. He's like, what? I'll buy it. She buys it. She doesn't have enough money to buy it and go to Moscow to play the tournament, which Jolene has convinced her to go to. And Jolene is studying for a law firm. Well, like, she's a paralegal now.
Uh-huh.
So she's
Those ones that
got
jump out
enough
of
money.
planes.
$3,000 is a lot of money in the 60s.
Lawsuits in hard-to-reach places that you need a special paralegal to reach.
Indeed. So Jolene gives her the money to go because she doesn't have anything better to do with it except save up for law school, and she's confident that Beth will win.
This time, surely.
This time, Beth goes in completely straight. No tranks, no beer, no drinking, no
60s-ing.
No 60s whatsoever.
No cavorting.
And she plays against Luchenko, which is another of the Soviet players, who she really admires because they have similar play styles. The unconventional, surprising tactics sort of play. And she beats Luchenko in, I think, like the quarterfinals of the tournament or something, and he's like, I have enjoyed this game tremendously. I think I have just played the best chess player of my career. Mind you, this guy's a former world champion.
Right.
So she goes on to face Borgov again. And so she plays the ever-famous Queen's Gambit.
Ooh,
which is...
She said the thing.
Roll credits.
And I don't know why they named the show after that, because Borgov plays the declined variation, so he doesn't even he doesn't even do the Gambit. But they decided to call it that anyway.
People would recognize this chess reference maybe.
It talks about a queen. That means something.
The Quambit Gambit. the Queen.
This is how you do the Tennyson Gambit.
Hello, guys.
With an ICBM,
With an intercontinental ballistic missile.
You now know how to counter the Tennyson Gambit.
Anyway, so how does she fare against Borgov?
She, after a grueling game, Borgov is finally defeated, and
Yay.
he resigns, and she wins the tournament. Hooray!
Yay!
And
she beat the final boss.
She beat the final boss, and as she's heading back in the car to the airport to fly back home, she, in a flight of fancy, decides, nope, I'm getting out of the car, and I'm going to go play chess with people on the street. End of show.
Huh.
Okay.
I will be with the people.
So, tell me your thoughts.
From somebody who doesn't know that much formally about chess, only ever casually playing it, it sounds, nevertheless, compelling of a story.
How so?
Well, sort of having to overcome her own inner demons as well as flaws in her strategy to rise to the top. Like, she has that initial wave of success based on her natural talent, but she's forced to come up against challenges and counters to that in order to grow and become better at her chess.
Which parallels some of the things she has to tackle in her own life, it seems.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess at the end, that her deciding, you know what, I'm done with this. Let's play chess in the street. It's her like sharing the raw love of the game, the way that the janitor did with her. At the beginning.
Yeah, because she was introduced to chess just by the janitor sitting with a chessboard by himself.
Yeah.
So passing on sort of that thing.
Yes. One important thing I've forgotten to mention was, like, at the start of every episode, there's like flashbacks to her and her biological parents.
Oh. That's a pretty big portion.
And so, like, the narrative that develops out of those is basically that her mother was a professor of mathematics at like Cornell or something. So that's
where she gets the smarts from.
Top notch. And her father was a businessman. But her mom was also kind of nuts.
Ah.
And, like, took the kid away from her father and didn't allow him into her life, and she's just generally being kind of wacko and, manic. And he's like, you know what? I can't do with it anymore. I'm done. So he goes.
He goes to buy milk and cigarettes.
He goes to buy milk and leaves the two of them, and Dr. Alice Harmon, as her mother is named, kind of has these little lessons that she gives to Beth over the course of the episodes. And they're all kind of, don't let men tell you what to be, You can't do what they want you to do. You gotta forge your own path and don't trust anyone and be your own person.
So things that have an impact on her naturally.
Oh, yes.
Which she sort of takes to heart at first in the way that she approaches life in the orphanage. But then
she finds a male role model figure in the janitor.
Insofar as he can be said to be a role model.
Well, yes. But
he's sort of a quiet, grumpy kind of guy. But she gives him some. He gives her rather something to. At first, fundamentally, she's just obsessing over.
Mm-hmm.
For most of her life, it obsesses over, and she has these obsessive tendencies that she clearly gets from her mom.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of the tagline or subtitle is like, with genius so often comes madness.
Yeah.
And that's kind of her struggle as a character throughout the series.
She also doesn't seem to have any reliable, consistent anchor characters. Like her...
Like from
birth
time to time she does,
leave.
but then they all like collapse and abandon her.
Or
and then at the end they all...
medical reasons.
Yeah, that too.
At the end they all come together and are at Benny's apartment and are like, okay, when he does this, don't do that. You got to do this. So they've like gone through all of the moves, all of the possibilities after their first adjournment. And so all of her supporters come together at the end when she's in Moscow and to guide her through, like the Soviets.
All these people coming together, giving her advice, telling her what to do. That advice that she takes to heart.
Because she has... the thing that made this show worth talking about for me was the last episode. I can't, obviously cover in super deep detail everything in it, but like throughout the first 6 episodes rather, I'm like, this is kind of interesting, but it's like kind of just wish fulfillment, fan service, fun chess weird story,
Sure.
But the 7th episode changed the whole dynamic for me.
Sure.
Because it's kind of her rejection of her whole past and her endeavor to become her own person. So it's like a coming of age story.
Mm-hmm.
Not one in which she discovers her identity and solidifies it, but like has an identity built for her by her circumstances and her biological mother, and then her deciding that the Russian way of doing things is better in the end. Which I thought was a really interesting narrative choice.
Yep.
It's like embracing communal life instead of being the individualism of the Americans. Which was like just a sharp, sudden turn that almost came out of nowhere, but like makes
until
perfect
you like
sense
dig
for
deeper
her.
into the stuff leading up to it, I suppose, where like it logically follows.
And she like was perfectly prepared for this because she decided to learn Russian in high school. So she like is competent enough to actually just stay in Russia. It's kind of ambiguous whether she stays there forever, But that's kind of part of the point, is like, does she just stay and never leave and, incarnate herself in Russia? Or does she just
become the chess
say,
nomad.
Screw you, Mr. State Department bodyguard, I'm going to do my own thing and be here with these people and share my love of this game that has shaped me so fundamentally. It's not perfectly clear, but I like the interpretation that she's choosing to embrace this communal attitude and embrace maturity and responsibility, unlike her entire past in the West.
And it's interesting that for the final tournament, she lets go of all the addictions that were holding her back as much as they were enabling her. And plays it
because certainly they were, like, she depended on them for her skill in chess.
But this time it was her personally triumphing of her own.
Strangely enough, by placing limits on herself, she was able to grow beyond these things that she was using as crutches.
Yeah. So it's a really neat cap to a story that would have been, without that episode, or had that episode ended differently, I wouldn't have considered this worth talking about.
Interesting. So the plot was on a knife's edge, as it were.
I mean, you knew how it was going to end. It's just,
she's got to win.
She's gonna beat the boss, of course, but like how you get
on
there.
The third try, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what she learns from the experiences. What was kind of up in the air to that point.
And they surprised me by doing a very interesting thing with it.
Any other cool things we want to discuss before we move into the Transcendentals?
It's a very small thing, but it's a cool thing. The titles of the episodes reflect both the place within the narrative and different phases of a chess game.
Oh, sure.
So, like, the first episode is called Openings. The second episode is Doubled Pawns, and then there's middle game, adjournments, just different terms for the sequence of events in a chess game that match the narrative events of that episode.
Final episode is Checkmate?
I think it's called The Queen's Gambit, but...
Oh, that would also make sense.
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Have to go check? Transcendental.
Endgame is what it's called.
Oh,
okay. That would make sense.
So she fights Thanos.
Russian Thanos.
Russian Thanos.
On a chessboard. Cool.
Cool.
Well, truth. What are some truths that can be found in the Queen's Gambit?
The 60s were a time.
Man.
Yeah. That is for sure. Because the sort of misguided hyper-individualism mixed with the need to find self-fulfillment in hedonism led to a lot of chaos and self-destruction, which is borne out in the different characters.
Mostly in Beth, but also in her adoptive parents, in her biological mom, and yeah.
Also, I think it's interesting what the Russians and communism represents in the story, even though...
From different characters' perspectives.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the one who says that line, like, the Soviets play together. Us Americans, we're all just individualists. It was Benny Watts.
Sure.
So he's got a sense of it, and he's like trying to find a way to overcome it, but is ultimately like a product of his environment and is still just...
And then when they ask her to reject communism, she says no, and in the end she embraces the communal way of thinking, even though it's not literally communism, granted, like communism in general.
Being an oversimplification for the sake of story.
because communism doesn't actually work like that or work.
Yeah.
But
yes.
But in terms of culture, in terms of being a more communal culture, I'd say other Eastern like sensibilities are more keen on that.
So that was an interesting little theme.
Any other truths to be found in?
It's kind of a tale of examining one's vision of what's truly good.
Yeah.
It's like she pursues the game of chess at first purely out of pragmatic. It's like at very first, it's just like, this is the only thing I've ever found in life that I've enjoyed.
It's a way to express myself in this overly strict,
and it's a way to put food on the table. And it's a way to put food on the table.
That also.
After she comes out of the orphanage and is in the family. But the game is anything but like, she's not concerned about the goods internal to the game.
Mm-hmm.
She's concerned about it as an end for something else, as a means to another end. But by the end, she comes to recognize that there are merits to winning within the game of chess according to its own principles. And unaided by, other substances.
Probably best exemplified by the sincere congratulations she got from this quarterfinals opponent.
That she looked up to as a master of a style of chess.
Yeah.
So, like, by receiving...
It's her becoming virtuous.
Yeah. Putting
At
aside...
least in that respect.
Putting aside... the
60s.
In order to win on her own merits.
Yeah.
And not profligacy. I just felt like saying that word because it popped into my head. But her proficiency in the game, as opposed to being aided by these other mind-altering habits and substances. Goodness. What is good in?
Are we done with truth?
Are we done with truth?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. What is good? What is good
in the Queen's Gambit?
In the Queen's Gambit.
Mrs. Wheatley is pretty good.
Yeah.
She's at first sort of a melodramatic, sad housewife, but eventually lets Beth kind of become her own person, and facilitates her growth and lets her own personality come out a little bit more. And she's quite a humorous character and becomes a good mother.
Very good.
She's very witty and she's very fun.
I suppose, and also like the various opponents and people she met who were willing to, they saw the talent in her and helped to
nourish it and develop.
Yeah. They didn't see her as an enemy or a rival. They saw her as just a partner in the game.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, hey, you have problems. You want to go fight the Russians? Let's go fight the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
Then she got
her whole squad coming together at the end to be her support system, like the Soviets had. Was another very good moment.
And putting aside addictive substances in order to better oneself is also commendable.
That's pretty great. That she was able to do that at the end.
Beauty. What is beautiful about the Queen's Gambit?
The
production quality
work,
pretty good.
It's a Netflix original, so the production quality is up there.
Mm-hmm.
It does a lot of dark shots where there's just like minimal light, and it's plays around a lot with that.
Natural
it's got
lighting and stuff like that.
The kind of 60s Art Nouveau stuff. The aesthetic is, if that's your thing, good for you.
Mm.
It's got its appeal, but it's quite well put together. The soundtrack is topical and fitting, and
seems like the writers had an understanding of chess sufficient to tell a compelling story about it.
Or at the very
the,
least,
the author
they
of the
copied
novel.
from the book.
Yeah.
That knowledge.
Yes.
Yes.
Unity. What brings everything together in the Queen's Gambit?
The
The 60s.
But actually.
But actually, it's more like Beth coming of age.
Yeah.
That's kind of the narrative through line of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if there's like something in the move, the Queen's Gambit, like some element of it that's like symbolically, like that symbolizes what her arc is. I don't know enough about chess.
Neither do I.
All I know is
we could wing on the Queen's Gambit is a tactic that is almost always refused, but is also it's very dangerous if it's accepted.
So fairly risky.
It's risky for it's minimal risk if the player with the black pieces declines it.
Mm-hmm.
There might be something there if you dig hard enough in the chess theory, but
you'd need someone who knows their chess theory to.
And
really
you'd also need the
down.
recipient to know chess theory in order to make it make sense.
Sure.
White gains a rapid lead in development and has much more active pieces.
Now we fire an anti-tank ballistic missile.
ICBM silo operated.
He did another one of those somewhat recently about the Alban counter gambit, which is
I didn't see that one yet.
a counter gambit to the Queen's Gambit. So
Nice.
Oh, we'll have to watch that
Bosnian Ape
video.
Society.
we'll have to.
Shout out to
Another cool fact that I forgot to mention is that
Yeah.
Beth Harmon is basically Bobby Fischer female. So almost entirely based on a real person. But
Oh, sure.
so much of Beth's character is comparable to Bobby Fischer, who was a real life American chess player in the 60s.
Gotcha.
Neat.
They had very similar play styles, and he had a big Russian rival, and he played the Sicilian defense, which Beth does when she plays with the black pieces.
Because that's one of the classic blunders.
That's not on the line, though.
No, it isn't. Anyway.
But yeah. So, yeah, that's a cool fact I wanted to mention. She's just female Bobby Fischer.
Gotcha. Well, are we about ready to wrap things up?
I think so.
Alrighty then. Well, thanks for listening to the Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts, and leave a rating to let us know what you think of the show. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Papists, and if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladiumpapists@gmail.com. We'll talk to you again next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
See ya.